So you can tell from the people, from everyone's biography, that we have some really interesting, very seasoned and experienced people here. And what I thought we might do is just kind of start off by explaining how the pandemic has impacted your business plans, or your investment strategy. And maybe a good place to start would be with you, Peter. You want to fill us in a bit?
Sure. Well, so I'm engaged with a number of organizations, so I'll try to just give you the high level on each, rather than going into too much detail. But so I'll start with the Rockies Venture Club. This is a 35-year-old investing group. We have about 200 members. We invest in about 25 to 30 early stage angel capital investment deals per year. But we are also very involved in the community. We have about 140 events every year, face-to-face events. And a lot of our revenue as a nonprofit comes from that. So needless to say, we are not doing that, but we have successfully moved to a Zoom pattern, and we're actually getting more engagement than ever. We've hit our 23rd investment this week for the year, so right on par to stay steady there.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, so that's all good, and I won't take too much time, but the second was Rockies Venture Fund. It's going fine, no change. The third was a huge change. We were working on raising the Rockies Impact Fund, which was to be a social environmental impact investing venture capital fund. When this all happened, we changed the theme, and it's now the Pandemic Impact Fund. And our thesis is we are investing only in companies that are, detecting, mitigating, and creating resilience in the face of the pandemic, which means not just healthcare, but education, future of work, future of life, you name it.
Thank you, Peter. So my question is, mostly just, have you had somebody pitch you and then through Zoom, but you couldn't hear them, and it was a lot of continuing technological snafus? Have you experienced any of that?
Mostly just people having the wrong screen up or whatever, but usually within 2 or 3 minutes we get it figured out. I will say the technology has worked actually quite well, and I've been interested to watch just of the psychology and the personal relationship that investors and their portfolio companies have. That people are willing to write checks to people out of state that they have never met. So we led a deal out of Baltimore, and most of the investors had never met them, and they still wrote checks, and we raised $1.75 million for them.
Peter, that is excellent news. Richard, can you tell us a little bit about what the lab has faced, how you've addressed it, and maybe a little bit of your going forward strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Sure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience for us at Enroll. Of course, we have about a third of our workforce, or 2/3 of our workforce, that actually work in labs, and only about a third of the workforce is office based. And so we've been through I think an interesting experiment in getting everyone out of the labs during the early part of the shutdown. And then having a phased approach to approaching people going back to work, starting with those people that needed to be in labs. But an interesting comment that got made at a meeting I was at recently about the effects of the pandemic on how we work was just that even for researchers that are working in the lab, they're not in the lab 24/7. They might go to the lab and do some work, do an experiment for a couple of weeks, and then they'll go away and analyze data. And so so the implication there is that there's probably no need for them to be in the office to analyze that data in this day and age. They could do that from a home office. Suffice to say that there's probably a population of the lab that will be, largely still at the lab as we go forward. And they're back there now, assuming that we don't have too many more problems with rising contraction rates. There'll be a very large portion of the lab, probably about 60% of the lab, that will be on some sort of hybrid model. In other words, they might have a day or two in the office and the rest of the time spent at home. And then there's a 10 to 15% of the employees at Enroll that probably never have a need to be in the lab, and they'll work from home. And so we're currently going through a strategy exercise on what is that, firstly formalizing what that work from home model looks like. And secondly, who fits into each of those buckets. So
Right.
interesting times for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Chong, how about you and the work you're doing with National Grid?
Yeah, it's quite interesting in this new sort of environment. National Grid, we have actually sequestered a lot of our controls folks in our facilities. That means they're not allowed to go home after work hours. And that's our day-to-day job. And we have this wonderful, amazing demonstration project that I want to talk to you more about. I have some slides that makes my argument a little bit more compelling. That describes that our work is not stopping. We're actually seeing a lot of usage and utility in our technologies that we deployed, and we're seeing value created out of these deployments. So love to talk to you more about those findings, and we're seeing that, hey, the future is bright. We're going to continue our investment into this area for our community, and especially for the city. Yeah.
Fantastic, Sean. Brian, once you, since you're actually deeply involved nationally and globally in helping companies reopen and people get back into their workspaces, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing?
Sure, Eric. So yeah, I'm with TEKSystems Global Services, as you know, and we are engaged in 17 different states, in about 30 different counties as well across the U.S., where we're helping out with both the contact tracing events. So we're deeply embedded in the communities, making sure that we are tracing the events, trying to help isolate and quarantine and stop the spread as much as we can. We also have a technology solution, which encompasses the front end components through a mobile app, and a back-end solution, which enables that manual contact tracing, as well as some technology-based contact tracing. And then on the very backside of it, the prior webinar that was on was talking about the data collection and the data analytics around COVID. And one of the things that we've done is we've pulled in an AWS well-architected solution that takes in multiple pieces of information, data from different sources, and pulls it into a single pane of glass to help enable some of those decisions and decision-making processes, such as hotspots, areas that maybe need a little more remediation activities, places where you should spot the trends and try to be ahead of it if you can. So a lot of activity working with the states, local governments, and also corporates to help them go back. Richard, very interesting what you were saying about that kind of multi-thread approach of how people are going back. I hear that consistently at the companies that I'm talking with. So very, very interesting to hear it again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
And then Eric, you have such a unique background, and you have you and your team are assisting out. Rolling out such a neat platform. Why don't you describe what made you focus on your testing regime that you have, and then where do you think your platform wants to go in terms of scaling and those kinds of projects?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm the CEO of COVIDCheck Colorado, and we're an LLC that's based at Gary Community Investments. There's a bit of the background that Eric was speaking to. So GCI is a foundation based in Denver that is dedicated to working with low-income families and their children, primarily in Denver Metro, but across Colorado. And so we stood up COVIDCheck back in May because we saw that those families and kids were not going to be able to really make it out of the pandemic in a safe and supported way, unless there was a safe and data-informed path back to school and back to work. And so that led us to work on expanding the affordability and accessibility of testing, particularly for those who are asymptomatic across Colorado, and especially in low income and high need areas, because data has shown that up to 40% of cases will be asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. So your body may not be giving you the signal that you're infected and shedding virus when in fact you are. And so we've set up a platform that really smoothly enables members of our partner organizations, which are K-12 districts, for-profit businesses, and nonprofit community organizations, to schedule tests, get tested in 5 minutes or less at a high throughput site, which we've got dozens across the state, get results back in what's been an average of 35 hours, and then have that data available both to the patient and in an aggregate and analyzed form available to the parent organization, whether that's an employer, a school district, or a community organization, so that if you as a teacher are walking into a school building, you know that all your colleagues have been tested on a regular basis and are there because they've gotten negative results. And if you're a parent, you know you're sending your child into that same environment that's supported and informed and being kept safe through that testing and information regime. So our aim is just to continue to scale this so that we're making it as broadly available across Colorado as possible. So we started off working with the schools because that's close to the heart of the foundation's mission, but it's also such a fulcrum, both economically and socially, for the whole state. And now we're working on partnering across other sectors.
Yeah, Eric, so important. Peter, it seems like I saw an email or two that passed my laptop, desktop, or mobile device that reflected that Rockies Venture Club was really looking at focusing on, not that they haven't before, but making it a pretty significant priority to focus on supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs and innovators, to work on getting them into the venture capital system and matching them with venture funds. Am I right about that?
Yes, yeah, it's actually a huge and complex problem, and it's ongoing and ingrained. And so thinking about creative solutions that will actually make a difference has been really important to us. And so at Denver Startup Week this year, we held a Black Investors Matter session, and we sort of solicited information from a large community of people and built up sort of an actionable plan about what we could do as a nonprofit to make a difference. And I'll just sort of give you the highlights of, something like fewer than 1% of venture capital goes to founders of color. And about, depending on which statistic you use, about 2 or 3% of women-led companies, or 12%. One statistic uses just women and not co-ed. So 12% of venture capital goes for women-led companies. At RVC, we have been working on this actually for quite a number of years, and we have about 14% of our portfolio is founders of color, and about 45% of our portfolio is women-led businesses. So we've already been doing this. Here's the things we need to do to change. One is, some of the things that keep people away from getting investment is they don't speak the language. And this is true, frankly, for everybody, but especially for founders of color. So we are putting together sponsorships where they can, people of color can have all of our classes and workshops for free. So removing financial barrier, removing education and knowledge barrier is probably one of the first big things. And then the second is not to sit back and wait for founders of color to come to us, but to reach out into communities and make it clear that we are welcoming these founders. And in fact, statistically, there's a reverse bias at RVC. If you are a founder of color, your chance of getting funded by us is greater per capita than if you are a white founder. So that's important. But then the last thing that's super important is to have investors of color and to have women investors, because first of all, that sort of makes it less intimidating, more welcoming. You're coming to people who are like you and think like you, look like you. And so I think having that and having those perspectives on how we make decisions with a diverse investor community, as well as the portfolio companies that come out of that, is super important. And right now, we are not doing as well there, frankly. We have about 15% women investors and about 4% investors of color. So working on that one.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Richard, maybe you could let us talk about a couple, 2 or 3 projects that you're leading or the lab's involved in that you really feel like are starting to move the ball around maybe EV, electrification of vehicles, or the use of hydrogen as a bridge fuel, or other initiatives, cutting edge initiatives that you're working with or the lab is working on at NREL?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you know, the lab works on a range of things from advanced transportation to, energy integration to smart cities. So, we work at generation assets, of course, as, historically what we've done. So we work across a very broad a platform. We have I think a pretty wide view of, how all of those things come together. I think probably, a couple of areas of real interest at the moment. Obviously, the electrification of passenger vehicles and the growth in that market, and what's required in terms of infrastructure to go with that to make that a palatable future for everyone is going to be key. But I think equally we're seeing significant investment and interest in hydrogen. Probably more internationally than we are here in the US, although I think the US will follow. Countries like Japan and places in Europe have actually qualified themselves as being hydrogen economies, or at least wanting to move towards being hydrogen economies. And so lots of work being done, again, sort of on the infrastructure side. What does that mean for the transportation of hydrogen, as well as also on trying to improve the electrolysis process for producing hydrogen. So, at both sort of ends of that scale, you've got research being done, analysis being done, and I think the big impetus here is really sort of this transition that we're going through of, can we use renewable fuels to produce green hydrogen? So solar or wind that, might have latent assets that are not feeding the grid, and taking those and turning those, using those to produce hydrogen. What we're describing at NREL, at least, as electrons to molecules. And so notionally, the idea of being able to take very low cost renewable fuels to produce hydrogen that can then be used either for storage, as a storage vehicle, and then turned back into electricity, which one of the problems with that is, that round trip efficiency is not that great. But if that hydrogen is actually being used for an input to manufacturing or an input in your industry, then that makes it more attractive. So, you not only have the production of hydrogen using, using renewables, but you then also have this opportunity to have storage and to turn that back into electricity if you need it. So I think, as you think about hydrogen, we've often thought about it as a vehicle fuel, and I don't think that'll change. I mean, a lot of the Asian automotive manufacturers are producing passenger cars that run on hydrogen because they're very clean. They solve some of the problems that you have with range anxiety that you get in electric vehicles. But you're also, we also see a significant opportunity for hydrogen potentially with things like aircraft and or the heavy duty fleet. So kind of a range of issues, a range of uses there. Excuse me, but I still think that the impetus that's driving a lot of this stuff is less transportation and more what do you do with the hydrogen? What's the most efficient use of that? And then so that will then drive some of these other things like transportation.
Absolutely, thank you. And Richard, I'm gonna move on to Chong, but when I come back to you, if you could take a minute to describe some of the work you're doing, the lab are doing around affordable housing, intelligent building systems, building envelope, another set of industry sectors that fall within our smart city, smart region. I'd love to hear about that. Yeah, Chong, sure. You have an interesting, enormously interesting project. There we go. You're ready to go to our slides.
Hey, thanks, Eric. It's good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to spend 5-6 minutes. I actually time myself a little bit for this. It's to really kick things off. I think it's a really cool partnership that we have directly with the city of Schenectady, and as well as some of the leading partners that we have on this project. So again, it's a privilege to be here, folks, to talk to you about our demonstration project we have with the city of Schenectady. We've learned a lot so far, and our outlook for the future investments in this area for our customers, not just for City of Schenectady, but our entire rate basin, thinking forward too for our utility counterparts to think about how we can better serve our customers, starting from the outdoor lighting and beyond too, when we talk about and think about smart cities and beyond. So here's the second slide. For those who are not familiar with the Smart Cities REV demonstration project that we have going on in the city of Schenectady, REV is called Reforming Energy Vision. It's Governor Cuomo's energy strategy goal that looks at how we advance the climate goals in New York. And one of the key components is allowing utilities to experiment with new technologies and solutions to help our customers, our municipalities, our communities think about new products and services. And one of the second largest project is actually this one that we have going with the city of Schenectady, where we're testing if our outdoor lighting infrastructure can serve as a platform for advanced lighting services, enablement of deploying smart cities technologies, and ultimately we want to identify various business models that will animate the market for these products and services for our customers and the wider New York service territory. And we believe that all the utilities in New York want to take the lessons learned from and the successful components of this project to benefit all of our communities in New York. So starting in Schenectady, we're deploying smart lighting and a plethora of smart cities technologies. The goal at National Grid here, we're striving is to enable our communities to become smarter, safer, and more sustainable. So we've learned a lot since we started this journey with the city. We continue to learn in our upcoming phase 2 deployment, which is slated for April 2021. Our first deployment since Q1 this year. That's when we wrapped up our first deployment in zones A and B of the city, where we convert half of the cities to efficient LEDs. And on top of that, we've installed smart lighting controls. Once we have all the streetlights in the city converted to efficient LEDs, we will be actually contributing 216 metric tons of carbon reductions annually towards the city's overall emissions goals, and positioning the city to be a clean energy community. So something that qualifies the city to become, for grants and things like that. It's opening the door for further innovation. The city received very well positive feedback from its residents about the new streetlights and its ability to dim and generate additional savings. We also performed field measurements using a lux meter and found that as we dim these lights, the city can generate additional energy savings without real physical, degradation to the perceived light output. So that was very interesting. We're actually partnering with RPI, which is a local university called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, to conduct a lighting study that will further evaluate the savings potential and provide the recommendation to the city to balance energy savings and at the same time promoting safety and security. So very cool finding, and we're looking in that area. Second, we're also seeing very high utility of smart cities technologies. We've deployed several different types of technologies. The city is actually using these technology features to support public safety and even learn about how pedestrian and traffic volumes changed before and after the lockdown. And one more interesting thing is that what we're testing with our vendor partners is that during COVID, during lockdown that happened in early March and April, we actually implemented a new capability to detect social distancing and actually crowd counting of 8 or more individuals. So we've taken something that we deployed that was commissioned for people or traffic counting, but then now we're actually repurposing that technology to help us and help the city to increase its public safety during these times. So, with these successes, and we're seeing even more importance as smart cities investments are becoming more and more valuable to our communities. Just starting with LED conversions, it's going to generate energy savings, and with some more savings with those smart lighting controls, it's going to help create efficiencies. It's going to improve city services. which also translates to savings. And at the end of the day, right now, in this new sort of environment, savings is what everyone needs, and more than ever, we need to move towards in this in this pandemic. Partnerships is key, and we can't do it without our partners. Our partners need us to understand our changing needs now in this new environment, and really to shift their products and services that will meet our needs. And we kind of need them really to help us implement value-driven and functional solutions for our communities that ultimately that are value-driven and needs to create an impact. So yeah, and also it makes total sense to work more closely with our partners. We're fortunate to be working with a number of these leading solution providers on the right here to customize a solution based on the needs of the city. We've been very fortunate to be working with these folks. I have to recognize the mayor, Mayor Gary McCarthy, for his leadership and the vision. We needed to start small and then deploying the best solution for the remainder of the city. So we're also taking those lessons learned from our first deployment, and we're applying it to our upcoming deployment. And the mayor always continues to challenge us and attends every single week's vendor partner meetings to challenge us with some to challenge us to be innovative and come up with ideas that are value driven. And so pointing it back to that earlier example that I provided, we've basically recommissioned some of the devices near the downtown areas to identify whether social distancing and crowd counting was actually implemented. So that was very, very interesting. And just thinking into the future, as we observe some of these opportunities, there is an immense opportunity, value, savings potential that's possible. Schenectady, we're not waiting here. We're going to lead, and by leading, we're going to be able to help our other communities in New York to create scalable, replicable, and cost-effective solutions to help other communities. So we're excited about our upcoming deployment to fully transform the city into a smart city with the lighting controls and smart cities technologies rollout. It's going to be exciting, and COVID-19 is not stopping us. Hopefully not.
No, Sean, very exciting. Thank you for sharing that with us. Pilots like that, I think, are going to be instrumental in how we start to move forward and start to deploy some technologies and initiatives and build the partnerships that are going to make a difference in the future. I'd like to maybe have Brian, and then I'm going to open it up, although I do want Richard to talk about it, the lab's intelligent building systems. But Brian, why don't you highlight a project or two that you worked on or are working on or that you're gaming around that has your interest, has your team's interest, and is something that you would like to share with us?
Sure. Let me talk to you about one of the projects we're working on with Allegis Group. So
Okay.
they're actually TEKSystems parent company, but in the spirit of we eat our own cake, right? we are implementing our solution as part of Allegis Group. So for those of you who don't know Allegis, we're a multinational company. We have offices, some 700-800 offices with tens of thousands of employees and 100,000 plus contract employees that we work with across the U.S. So this whole going back to work, making sure that people are safe back in their communities was a big effort for us to make sure that we were pushing out all of the information, gathering the information that we need from each region, and pulling that in to be able to, open up effectively, safely, and understand the rules. As part of that, what we've done is we implemented a technology-based solution, which takes the pre-return to work. So as people start to go back to work, they check in with the mobile app. To your point, Eric, right? There's a lot of asymptomatic folks that might not necessarily know that they have COVID, but there's enough indicators that say, hey, go get tested. We also combine that with some of our testing interfaces back to testing companies so that you can see that people are actually getting tested. before they come back. And you can see that, to your point, Eric, that people are safe that you're working with, right? That everybody's coming in, understanding that, you're ready to go back, because it's not necessarily about that person that's returning to work. It's about that contact back to people that may be of high risk, right? I know me personally, if I went into the office, I'd be concerned about bringing back COVID to my mom. My mom's at that, she's like in that point, that 1% of the 1% of the 1% top tier, right? So if she gets COVID, it's not going to be a good outcome. So, I want to make sure that I'm going into a safe environment, and that's the product that we've built here for Allegis is do the symptom tracking up front, do your testing up front, monitor, understand the rules of each one of the jurisdictions. That was the other piece that was also difficult for rolling this out nationally. Is you've got pieces of New York with one set of rules. You've got pieces of Georgia, Texas, Chicago, California. The rules were just ever changing, and trying to understand exactly how that all came together so you could abide by the rules and the guidelines that each one of the jurisdictions was performing was a large task. But we've mostly automated that process now, pulling in those jurisdictional guidelines. And so the leadership can then take a look at that, understand that all of the offices that people are going back to, they know what the capacity needs to be there. They can change their monitoring systems. They can change the badging approaches. So you reach maximum capacity, you can't let anybody else in. All of those things were part of this solution to integrate it back to corporate, so you could get a really good solid understanding of the office safety and who's returning to work. Now the other piece of this is really about what happens if someone does bring in COVID, right? That whole contact tracing event, right? That's the next piece of this. As I mentioned in my intro, we're working with states, local governments. Most of that is a very manual contact tracing event. What we've done is, as part of our corporate environment, is we've automated that where a person who tests positive for COVID goes in and they can put in who they've been in contact with. We can also isolate based off of the office data, who was in the office, and we can send out an automated event to everybody, let them know, hey, you need to go get tested. You may have been exposed. And then we also have that manual follow-up piece of it. So it's very interesting. We're rolling that out for Allegis, and pulling all of that data into the analytics engine, which is really the power behind all of this, because data is data, but until you can understand what's going on with it, how it all correlates, and if there's predictability there, you can use some intelligence around that to get you the results that you need, and be able to proactively either close down or an office, or use company policy to turn it down a little bit. And all of that is because we want to keep these cities safe, right? We want people to get back to work. We want people to be safe when they're at work. We don't want people getting on mass transit and being sick. That's one of the big things that we actually bump up against is, well, how do you handle that? Unfortunately, you can only really flag the people that are doing mass transit and understand who they are, and then how that all relates as part of the overall data set that you pull in and take a look at. So very interesting stuff. We're talking, obviously we're talking to several other large companies across the US, and working to implement this there as well. The other piece of the solution that we're working with is at that state and local level, right? So there's a large southern state that we're working with right now to roll out a different flavor of this, where we can push out the rule set and the guidelines to small businesses, right? And let them know, hey, here's the rules that you should be abiding by. Here's the rules that that are the most recent ones, right? What's changed, and then they can attest that they are adhering to all of that. So it's almost like a, hey, this business is saying that they're safe to go back and do business with, and they're attesting to it. Not, it's not necessarily like a food, kind of a safety inspection or anything. It's an attestation, and then you have the ability for citizens to come and also go in online and say that these, I went there and there were large crowds, safety was not there, masks weren't being worn, and attest to it that way. So you can go take remedial steps to either have a safe business or go take steps to make sure that they are adhering to that. So
Great.
that's
Thank
what we're
you,
doing.
Brian.
Yep.
Great. So when I was putting this panel together, it's titled Investment and Partnership. And I was looking at it from the perspective of, in one sense, the hats I wear. So while my company is a technology enhancement an accelerator, and composed of national labs, one of which is the National Renewable Energy Lab, and then Fortune 500 companies, entrepreneurs, innovators, key federal agencies, local governments, and research institutions. I also am the chair of our state's venture capital authority. So the state of Colorado has a venture fund that we've been up and running about 15, 16 years. We're small, entrepreneurial. We have maybe 100 plus million under management. And we're required by law to invest our capital, to use a GP to invest our LP capital, 50% statewide, 25% rural, and 25% urban distress. And so over the years, for many, many years, we had a single GP that did that, and we just tried to make sure that we allocated so that it met the mandate. But we do want to, we're a job creation engine, and we do want to have returns come back because we're evergreen. Capable people have the right to go back to the legislature and get additional funds, but we wanted to be evergreen, and we are. So one of the things that came out of when I first came on the board is I thought we should have a dedicated rural-only venture fund. Not because it was clear that early and seed stage institutional venture investing into rural communities was something that there was clearly a model, but basically because we didn't know if there was a model. But I thought we would never know if there was a model if we didn't get the right GP in place and strategy and try to do that. So we've done that, and we have a group, the Greater Colorado Venture Fund, that in its early stages, like a couple of years, 2.5 years or so, has been, looks to be very successful. And so I'm working with my board to do something similar with our urban distress capital, to launch a separate fund that would look at underrepresented communities associated with our urban areas and be creative around that. And then, of course, the other part of the panel today is partnerships. And so I have some sort of working, friendly, or collaborative relationship with many of the people that are panelists. And I was wondering, as we kind of head toward the end of our time together here, if people wanted to pick up on any of that. Peter's mentioned, Peter, of course, has mentioned what he's doing, and so has Eric P. But anything that's going around that, partnerships, unique partnerships, how you think we can collaborate, work together, accelerate our deployment of technology solutions into the marketplace, and work together to further develop what will be absolutely necessary to make our communities and our communities writ large be safer, happier, and more productive. Sure. Peter?
So, you asked what we changed when the pandemic started, and one thing we changed has to do with partnerships in a very serious way. Before pandemic, we had about 5 chapters of investors around the state, and it turns out entrepreneurs will drive and investors won't. So we took the entrepreneurs around the state on a road trip literally every month to Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, Western Slope. When the pandemic came and we started doing these meetings on Zoom, it didn't matter. where people were. So, we have people literally hundreds of miles apart. So rather than having a Fort Collins meeting one day and then a Denver meeting and so on, we totally changed up our structure, and it had to do with partnerships. So we are now, instead of 5 regional groups, we're 3 topic-based groups. So these topics are, and I'll just start with clean tech since we got Richard on. We had a lot of interest in clean tech within our community, and people with some expertise in that. So we partnered with the Colorado Clean Tech Industries Association and NREL to sort of develop a group of investors who were just looking at clean tech deals, bringing sector expertise, investing in that, working to share in deal flow and basically wisdom of crowds. And then the second one was in life sciences. And as you know, Colorado is a leader in life science new company formation. So that's traditionally been about 36% of our investment portfolio. So for that, we partnered with the Colorado Bioscience Association, and CBASA has been an awesome leader within the state. And so the idea there is we partner with them, bringing in many of their members to be new investors and bringing their expertise to the decisions that we have to make as investors. And then the third was general technology and CPG. And for that, we partnered with the Colorado Technology Association, who, as you all know, are leaders within the state in the technology space. So same thing with engaging and mobilizing investors within the state to invest in our companies and jobs in our own state, but doing it in an interesting way that followed the interest of the investors within the group and the strengths of Colorado as an investing ecosystem.
Thank you, Peter. Maybe if we could pull in Richard and Eric, that'd be great. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, Peter, thanks for the shout out. We love working with you guys.
By the way, I want to say I just picked up my NREL Industry Growth Forum mug today.
Perfect.
7 months.
Perfect segue to where I was going to go. So we actually run an investor conference each year that we've historically done in Denver in person, and Peter's been a part of that for many years, as Eric. But what's interesting about that is with COVID this year, we had to move that to an online forum, and I think we're a bit space limited in the hotel that we're in. I think we could, accommodate about 450 people. I think we ended up with 700 people participating in the event this year. And obviously, one of the key advantages there that Peter pointed out was, if you don't have to get on a plane, it's very easy to actually get online and actually participate in an event like that. So that was one experience. But as a national lab, we're an applied lab, and so we have over 900 active partnerships. With non-deal, what we define as non-DOE clients. So that's everything from industry partners to investors, to startups, to academic institutions and other other governments, whether they're state governments or foreign governments. National Grid's one of our partners on the utility side. We have obviously a number of utility partners. We have foundation partners like the Kerry Group. And so our partnerships are really sort of, for us, the key in terms of getting insights into the market and understanding what those needs are, so that our research is directed towards meeting those needs as they're identified by the people that are out there. And so that's really, that's a very core piece of what we do, within our group at the lab, but also for the lab in general.
Thank you, Richard. And Eric P, to distinguish it from Eric D.
It's always good to be on with a name twin. Yeah, so I mean, partnerships have really been COVIDCheck would not exist without them. So the fundamental one, of course, is with our parent organization, the foundation. But to make this sort of scalable, asymptomatic diagnostic screening possible, there's a whole chain of providers and entities that need to be aligned and brought together. And that's really been our core function, is to say, okay, where do incentives and align with need and supply. So the value chain that we've got incorporates diagnostic labs, clinicians who are actually on site collecting samples, software providers who are collecting patient data, accessioning results for the lab, and delivering those results to partner organizations. And then there's the entire public sector as well. So our work directly impacts public health agencies on the county level and CDPHE and all the way up to the governor's office. And so making all those different entities communicate effectively and serving as a sort of translator between them has been one of the core functions we've been able to serve. And without that, we would still be seeing, I think, a lot more siloed activity where you have a lab that's got capacity, you got a state population that's in desperate need of testing, but there's no way for the two to actually effectively and in a revenue neutral or cash positive way for all the parties involved to work with each other. And so, it's been exciting to be able to forge a lot of those connections and learn from each of the entities that have just deep expertise in their own sort of lane as part of this puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. Richard, could you take a minute to talk to us a little bit about the building systems, affordable housing, intelligent building systems work that the lab is engaged in and driving?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the offer to sort of touch on that.
Yeah.
One of the areas that over the last 30 or 40 years, the lab's been very focused on, and one of the early areas of research that we got into was the whole idea of buildings efficiency or energy efficiency, which goes obviously beyond buildings. But when you think about the challenges of affordable housing, the whole notion of both resiliency and energy efficiency is so critical, because when you're dealing with poorer families that need somewhere to live, you want to be able to provide them with comfort, but you also want to be able to provide them with home housing that's affordable, hence the name. But one of the ways in which to do that is by building homes that are actually more energy efficient to start with, so that you lower their overall costs of energy. And there's a term that gets used pretty regularly when you're talking about affordable housing. It's energy poverty, which sort of is the notion of you're spending so much money on your energy costs that you don't have money to do anything else, whether it's buy food or buy clothes or things like that. And so the lab for a long time has been focused on buildings as a high consumer of energy and residential buildings in particular. And then throughout that period of time, we've also been focused on what does that look like for the affordable housing stock. And so we're doing very interesting work around, as we've always done, around residential building efficiency, energy efficiency, and that could be anything from a single single unit, whether that's a home or it's a multi-unit apartment. Or as you start to extrapolate that out, you start to think about that more in terms of, complexes. So, infill neighborhoods for low-income housing, where they've got ready access to transportation, ready access to their workplaces, ready access to schools and education, ready access to important things like supermarkets and that sort of thing. Taking those empty lots or maybe underused lots and turning those into communities for people that require that affordable housing in a way that makes sense both financially as well as from a comfort perspective and an efficiency perspective. So going back to the term I was using, you extrapolate that out from a single dwelling unit to a multi-dwelling unit to a regional dwelling unit, and then you can actually take that and extrapolate that further out to, say, a suburb or a city or a region, or even a state or a country for that matter. But some of the work that we're doing is, actually a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is in manufactured homes. And there are a few things that are very attractive to the manufacturing process. One is it's done indoors, so you don't have downtime during poor weather events. Secondly, you can have a much higher quality standard, and so that's obviously has a real impact in terms of the energy efficiency side of things. You can do things like address different materials for the home's exterior and test those and that sort of thing. And the third thing I would point to is you have a lot less wastage than you do on a traditional what we call stick-built home. And so those three things, I think, in combination are really things that are going to be critical for us in terms of fairly rapid builds going forward to accommodate the lower income families and provide a level of cost effectiveness, both in terms of the cost of the home, but also in terms of the operation of the home, in terms of energy efficiency, as well as that comfort piece that goes with that. And then you start to think about things like Chong was describing in Schenectady, and this is happening in other places as well. But what does it mean to go beyond the house? What does it mean to go to the street lighting system? Where you can not only provide street lighting, but you can also provide things like security cameras and that sort of thing. And so, as we think about, what that path forward looks like, it takes on, many dynamics. And I kind of touched on access to transportation, access to food and that sort of thing. So, I think we start to think differently about what is affordable housing and how do we make that good for everyone.
Thank you, my friend. So it looks like we're right at about an hour. Any concluding thoughts? And I can turn this back over to Macy.
I just want to get a shout out to Richard Adams too for our collaboration on a hydrogen work. National Grid, we're also looking at hydrogen blending to green our gas delivery infrastructure and really look at how do we bring that supply to our customers. So NREL is doing a lot for us, and we just want to take this up another opportunity to show that appreciation. And this is another area where we're partnering with partners here to further that transformation at the utility level. So not just smart cities, but beyond that, there's so much we're working on, and partnerships is where we need to work together to continue that that journey. I mean, all of our states across the board have 80 by 50 goals. National Grid, we actually just released our net zero by 2050 goals. So this is going to be an exciting journey between now and then to really make this happen. And now we set our goals, we need to make it happen.
Absolutely. John, quite an exciting journey. Panelists, I think this was great. It was a great cross-section of seasoned and experienced people. And I really appreciate everyone's willingness to take time out of very busy day, very busy week to join us, support our Smart Regions collaboration initiatives, and to maybe match a new phase with a new name through this particular panel and platform. You guys are great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Folks, I'm just going to share one more slide with you real quick to close out the day here. Let's see. And just want to conclude by saying, this has been just a small sample of all the things that the Smart Regions Collaborative members have been working on, the partnerships, the investments, the great projects focusing on equity and data and sharing across jurisdictions. So if you're interested in joining this group and being a part of it, feel free to contact me or contact Jean. We'd be happy to talk to you more about where maybe you could fit into the Smart Regions Collaborative, maybe have you on one of our monthly calls. Would love to hear from you. So with that, I will close out today. Be sure to join us tomorrow for day 2, the last day of the workshop, starting again at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So thank you all for your attention today, and hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks so much and have a great evening.